The events unfold within the game, in the forest of Wildberry, which appeared peaceful and brightly lit. A wounded man then came into view, visibly exhausted and breathing heavily, with fatigue and injuries etched across his face. The situation was dire, as the man was surrounded by a group of fighters, while several bodies lay on the ground, indicating that a fierce battle had taken place. The leader of the opposing group appeared tense and anxious, worried about someone who had yet to arrive despite all efforts, and asked his companion what they should do next. His companion responded coldly and firmly, insisting that the man be killed immediately. One of the burly fighters then charged forward to carry out the command, launching a powerful attack. In this critical moment, the injured man braced himself, fearful of what was about to come. Suddenly, a young man appeared at high speed, intervening just in time to stop the blow and save the wounded man from what would have been a fatal strike. With a swift motion, the newcomer flung the attacker away, completely eliminating the threat. The wounded man's companions immediately felt a sense of relief upon seeing the young man and gratefully called out his name, Jae-hyun, thankful for his timely arrival and rescue. On the other hand, the opposing fighters began shouting that Khan had arrived, urging one another to attack him together in unison to overwhelm him. But Jae-hyun proved to be extremely powerful. He effortlessly repelled them, wielding his sword with remarkable speed and agility. As a result of his swift counterattack, the enemies fell to the ground, defeated. Jae-hyun stood tall, smiling confidently, and told them that attacking him all at once would change nothing. They simply could not defeat him. It became clear that his real name was An Jae-hyun, and his title was the Hero Slayer. Jae-hyun's comrades, filled with regret, apologized for getting him involved in such a dangerous fight. They confessed they had never expected the enemies to set a trap, but Jae-hyun rejected their apology, assuring them that they were not to blame for what had happened. He then extended his hand to their leader, helping him get back on his feet. The leader looked at Jae-hyun in surprise, touched by his gesture. The others around him repeated Jae-hyun's name with heartfelt gratitude for what he had done, while Jae-hyun again told them that none of it was their fault. Jae-hyun went on to explain that the real problem was someone else, someone who was always late due to their lack of skill, which had endangered the entire group. His words were clearly aimed at Che. He then turned to her with a mocking smile and asked if she agreed with him, deliberately provoking her. At that moment, Che interrupted, mocking Jae-hyun and his companions. She described their relationship as a fake friendship overflowing with emotion. Continuing her mockery, she claimed that no matter how many weaklings joined forces, it wouldn't make a difference in the end. Che's true identity was soon revealed. Her full name was Che Seolyeon, a member of a group called the Thunder Hunters, and her title was the Thunder Queen. Jae-hyun began mocking her once more, pointing out how she was always angry, attacking recklessly, and losing time and again to those she deemed trash. Che responded with clear anger, warning him not to push his luck or he would regret it later. But Jae-hyun merely smirked and pulled out a mysterious object from his hand, sarcastically questioning, "Regret?" making it clear he was not afraid of her at all. In that instant, Jae-hyun activated something called the First Slot, which caused a drastic change in his appearance. A powerful and distinctive battle outfit emerged on him. After transforming, he smiled confidently and told Che that regret was a feeling only the weak like her would ever know. Che's rage intensified and she shouted, calling him an arrogant bastard before ordering her group to eliminate him immediately. Still, Jae-hyun stood there, smiling defiantly, and declared that no matter how hard she tried, she would never be able to kill him. Surprise began to show on Jae-hyun's face as he stood in shock at what had just happened. It became clear that he had been stabbed forcefully from behind, and standing behind him were the very comrades he had once trusted. Warnings started flashing across his screen, alerting him that his health points were rapidly dropping and his movement was now restricted. In disbelief, Jae-hyun asked, barely able to speak, how such a betrayal could happen, to which one of his companions apologized, admitting that they had deceived him. The group's leader then explained their betrayal, claiming they all needed the money, and asked Jae-hyun not to hate him for it. Jae-hyun was overwhelmed with anger and disbelief, unable to comprehend such treachery from those he had considered his closest friends. At that moment, Che appeared, laughing cruelly, and clearly taking pleasure in the situation, as if it were some sort of entertainment. She mocked Jae-hyun for his naivete in believing in a fake bond of friendship with his teammates, emphasizing that such emotions meant nothing when compared to money. She then approached him, telling him that she would now make sure to remove him from the game permanently. Continuing her humiliation, Che said that if she kept killing him like this every time he logged in, he wouldn't even be able to take a single step forward in the game. She reminded him of his own past words, in which he had confessed that he was a worthless nobody in real life, and that the game was all he had. With a vicious and mocking smile, she told him that he had now returned to being that pathetic person once again. Unable to bear the insult, Jae-hyun erupted in anger and lunged at her, demanding that she be silent. However, his attack was in vain. He was struck down easily, and his blood spilled across the ground. As everyone stood around him, Che thanked them all for helping her get rid of him. In his final moments, Jae-hyun, filled with rage and deep pain, asked why they had betrayed him despite everything he had done for the team. One of his former comrades shouted at him to just die already, explaining that someone had paid them hundreds of millions to kill him, and asked what he had expected them to do in the face of such a sum. The shock was immense for Jae-hyun, all this pain and betrayal, just for money, even though he had given them so much in the past. He reminded them of their past words, when they had claimed they were like family, reproaching them for such a devastating betrayal. Their faces showed fake expressions of guilt and fear of the consequences, but by then it was already too late. The game's notification soon appeared, declaring that he had died, and the word dead flashed repeatedly on the screen. The game officially informed him that he was dead and could not log in again for 48 hours as a death penalty. Jae-hyun awoke in the real world, drained and physically exhausted from the trauma he had just experienced inside the game. At that moment, he broke down, sorrowfully admitting to himself that he had lost everything. Information about the game Warlord was then displayed, highlighting its status as one of the world's most popular and successful games. A livestream clip followed, showing players fighting a powerful red dragon amid excited reactions from viewers. The game was built on cutting-edge virtual reality technology and generated unbelievable amounts of money. It was the one thing Jae-hyun had ever been good at. In real life, he had always been labeled as worthless or trash. In the past, when Jae-hyun first demonstrated his exceptional skills in the game, one impressed player had approached him, astonished by his abilities, and asked about his level. That person, smiling, then offered to team up with him, and in that moment, Jae-hyun felt a rare sense of belonging. Jae-hyun began reflecting sorrowfully on what had happened to him, and for a moment he decided he would forgive those who had betrayed him. But within moments, a wave of intense anger swept over him, and his resolve shifted. He made up his mind to hunt them down and kill every one of them in revenge for what they had done. As he fumed over all the pain and sacrifices he had made for them, he placed a call to someone named Dong-soo. Lost in thought as he walked down the street, he failed to notice the pedestrian light turning red. By the time he realized it, it was too late. He found himself wishing he had known things would end up this way. He would have stopped caring about anyone from the very beginning. He tried to run, but a speeding truck struck him with great force. The scene was soon covered in blood from the impact. People nearby screamed in panic, shouting that someone had just been run over. Jae-hyun lay on the ground, struggling between life and death, and heard his phone announcing that the number he dialed was unavailable. A cruel irony struck him, that out of all things, he had been hit by a garbage truck. With great difficulty, he repeated to himself that he couldn't die now. A painful memory resurfaced in his mind, his former comrades shouting at him to die quickly, revealing that they had been paid hundreds of millions to kill him. He also recalled Che's mocking expression as she defeated him. In his final moments, he vowed that he would have his revenge, merciless and brutal. Suddenly a flash of light appeared, as if a mysterious connection was being established, followed by a notification indicating that a connection was being verified. Another message then welcomed him back into the game under his alias, Herkan, leaving him shocked. He found himself facing a challenge: survive an encounter with the legendary beast Minotaur, Lord of the Labyrinth, as part of a tutorial stage in the game. Jae-hyun was stunned by the nature of this tutorial and questioned what was going on. One of the new players, frustrated, shouted at him to pull himself together and help fight the terrifying giant monster attacking them. They quickly realized that defeating the creature alone was impossible and proposed working together. During the conversation, Jae-hyun expressed disbelief at seeing a monster that had been removed from the game 5 years ago due to its difficulty. His teammate, confused, responded that the game Warlord had only been released 10 months ago. Jae-hyun stood there, repeating in astonishment that it had only been out for 10 months. His teammates noticed his strange behavior and asked what was wrong, clearly puzzled by his reaction to this new information. One of them urged him to focus and get ready, instructing him to wait for the signal to move. However, Jae-hyun ignored the instructions and began walking away from the group without a word, confusing his teammates who called out to him, asking where he was going. He continued advancing in silence, increasing their bewilderment. They shouted in disbelief, thinking his actions were reckless, especially with the powerful monster standing in his way. At that moment, the beast charged at Jae-hyun with incredible ferocity, aiming to kill him, and his teammates yelled out warnings, telling him he would die if he kept this up. But Jae-hyun showed no hesitation. He faced the monster head-on, brimming with confidence and resolve. With a single swift and powerful strike, he delivered a fatal blow to the creature, revealing an astonishing and overwhelming strength. The beast let out a fierce roar as Jae-hyun delivered a devastating blow that swiftly brought it down. The two other players were stunned, utterly amazed that Jae-hyun had defeated the monster with a single strike. They both looked at him in astonishment and attempted to speak to him. One of the players stepped forward with a smile, openly praising Jae-hyun's incredible talent, and expressed his desire to have him join his team. He extended his hand toward Jae-hyun in a gesture eerily reminiscent of a past moment etched in Jae-hyun's memory, when he had once been betrayed. In that instant, Jae-hyun's expression changed, and anger lit up in his eyes. He coldly told them that he had already made his decision moments ago. Confused, the two players asked what decision he was referring to. Without warning, Jae-hyun launched a powerful strike at them, his eyes blazing with fury. As blood splattered around him, Jae-hyun told himself grimly that if he ever trusted anyone again in this life, he would be no better than a dog. A message appeared, declaring the return of Herkan, the hero slayer, to the past. Jae-hyun then suddenly awoke in a strange place, removing a virtual reality helmet from his head. He looked around in confusion, trying to figure out where he was. He realized that he was inside a gaming store, specifically a V-Gear shop that sold virtual reality equipment. As memories came flooding back, Jae-hyun recalled that 5 years ago, he had been poor and used to play in this store because he couldn't afford his own gear. He wondered seriously if he had truly returned to the past. Once that thought settled in, he immediately resolved that if this was really the case, there was much he needed to do. He moved quickly, darting through the crowded store. Thinking rapidly, he reminded himself that he now had 5 years' worth of future knowledge and experience. He knew that if he used this advantage, he could carry out his revenge. Without hesitation, he approached a store clerk, handed her his payment card, and requested the base V-Gear unit. The clerk appeared slightly flustered, but told him she would assist him right away. A wave of excitement and anxiety washed over Jae-hyun as he began planning the next steps to level up quickly in the game. But the clerk soon surprised him by stating that his balance was insufficient to complete the purchase. Jae-hyun was taken aback, shocked by this unexpected setback. He smiled bitterly, realizing that his financial situation in the past truly had been dire. He stood there deeply frustrated, blaming himself for forgetting that he had no money, and remembered that the only reason he had played here in the first place was because he couldn't afford to buy his own device. The pressure began to mount, and he wondered what he could do now, whether he should try to earn money quickly, though he knew he couldn't afford to waste time waiting. At that moment, an image of Che appeared on a nearby advertisement screen, part of a campaign for the game. The ad posed a question: "What are you waiting for?" Her words were bold and direct, declaring that the strong do not fear challenges and that hesitation was a luxury no one could afford in the middle of battle. Jae-hyun stood silently before the advertisement, watching as Che, the Thunder Queen, appeared on screen, calling upon everyone to become true masters of war. He remained in front of the massive display showing the game's title, Warlord, as the bold caption urged him to start immediately. Lost in thought, Jae-hyun reflected on his current situation, weighing what his next move should be. The image of Che's mocking face returned to his mind, along with her scornful words telling him he had become nothing more than worthless trash again. Determined, Jae-hyun resolved that he couldn't afford to wait any longer. He knew that hesitation was a luxury he could no longer afford. As the sun began to set, the scene shifted to a modest, simple apartment, Jae-hyun's home. There, a VR gaming system had just been delivered and installed in his room. The technician informed him that the setup was complete and promptly left, to which Jae-hyun replied with a brief, dismissive response. He stood in thought, holding a card in his hand, and told himself that the fastest way to get money was through that card. It was an advertisement for a quick and easy loan service. Not long before, he had sat across from a man and requested a loan of 10 million won. The man had casually assured him that it could be arranged. However, the man then paused and ominously added, "But," in a way that unsettled Jae-hyun. In a sudden and violent motion, the man stabbed a knife into the card on the table, issuing a clear and direct threat. He warned Jae-hyun that if he failed to repay the money, his life would become an unbearable hell. Though shaken and anxious, Jae-hyun said nothing in response. Despite the risks, he made the decision to take the card, affirming to himself that he didn't care about the consequences. He began putting on the VR headset, assuring himself that he was ready to risk everything, even descend into hell, if it meant getting a chance to avenge those who had betrayed him. The faces of the traitors flashed in his memory, and his resolve to take revenge had never been stronger. Filled with fury and anticipation, he ordered the system to begin the connection immediately. The system quickly recognized him and confirmed his login to the game. Jae-hyun entered the game world as his character, Khan, and received a formal welcome to the universe of Warlord. He stood silently, waiting for a particular character to appear and assist him, struggling to recall her name. At that moment, a girl with blonde hair radiating golden energy appeared before him. Introducing herself as Ariadne, she told Jae-hyun she was there to guide him on his journey, and he recognized her identity instantly. Ariadne extended her hand and began explaining the game's rules, inviting him to select one of the basic available classes. She went on to clarify that he would need to choose one starting class from a set of 3. She emphasized that the skills he chose to develop now would determine the specialized path he would follow later in the game. The first class she described was the warrior, who fights on the front lines using direct combat weapons. Jae-hyun considered the class and realized he could probably level up quickly with his prior experience, but ultimately rejected the idea, knowing it would become too difficult to progress solo later on. Ariadne then introduced the second class, the cleric, a support role focused on healing and assisting others. Jae-hyun dismissed it instantly without hesitation. Jae-hyun told Ariadne plainly that he had no intention of protecting or supporting others, making it clear that only one option remained for him. Ariadne smiled and wished him an enjoyable adventure as she began preparing to activate his selection. Golden strands of magical energy began flowing from her hands as she initiated the process to transport Jae-hyun to the next stage. The energy surrounded him entirely, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. A system message appeared before him, informing him that he had selected his base class and would now be transported to the tower, corresponding to his choice. Jae-hyun arrived at the tower and was greeted by a commanding voice that welcomed him as a young seeker of knowledge. The voice belonged to someone named Gulko, the guide responsible for training players who chose the mage class. Gulko asked Jae-hyun what type of magic he wanted to study, and without hesitation, Jae-hyun replied that he wanted to learn dark magic. Gulko was stunned by the answer, pausing for a moment as he struggled to process what he had just heard. He tried to convince himself that he had misheard due to his age, and asked if Jae-hyun had meant earth magic instead, but Jae-hyun firmly repeated his desire to learn dark magic. Gulko's expression shifted, and concern took over his features. He warned Jae-hyun that dark magic was extremely dangerous and could potentially destroy the user's soul. But Jae-hyun replied with clear resolve, stating that he understood the risks and had deliberately chosen this path. Gulko began trembling, shaken by Jae-hyun's bold decision. Suddenly, Gulko transformed into a terrifying, shadowy figure in front of Jae-hyun, assuring him that everything would proceed smoothly. His appearance changed entirely. He now resembled a skeletal being. He spoke to Jae-hyun with a mocking tone, remarking that it had been a long time since anyone had chosen this path. He told Jae-hyun that if he was truly ready, he should place his hand on the skill book that had appeared before him, warning him to choose wisely and with caution. Without hesitation, Jaehyun placed his hand on the skill book immediately, despite Gulko's warning that this path was too dangerous for the reckless. Jaehyun smiled with great confidence and declared that he was not the kind of person who could be called reckless. Gulko burst into loud laughter, impressed by Jaehyun's confidence and daring choice. He admitted that Jaehyun was truly fascinating and that he hadn't encountered someone like him in a very long time. Jaehyun then recalled a famous video from his past life featuring a player who used necromancy, the art of summoning the dead. In that video, the lone player had managed to defeat a powerful boss without any help. At that moment, Jaehyun realized how desperately he needed a power similar to that one. A system message appeared, confirming that he had officially become a necromancer, granting him the title Novice in Necromancy and a skill called Skeleton Shard. With a confident smile, Jaehyun repeated the name of his new skill, Skeleton Shard. He activated the skill, and a glowing shard of a skeleton began to materialize from magical energy before him. A message appeared explaining that a skeletal warrior consumed magical energy in order to fully manifest. Jaehyun stood silently, watching the skeleton form in front of him, and declared to himself with determination that in this life he would become a necromancer. The skeleton fully took shape, signaling the completion of Jaehyun's transformation into a true necromancer. With a confident smile, Jaehyun declared that it was time to level up, then asked himself where the training dungeon was located. He turned to glance at the skeleton he had summoned, only to be met with a bizarre scene. The skeleton was amusing itself by bouncing its own skull like a ball. Jaehyun stood in stunned silence for a moment, unable to fully process what he was seeing. Without wasting more time, he stepped into a glowing portal that had appeared before him, emerging into the beginner training dungeon. Concerned, Jaehyun began questioning the skeleton's odd behavior. It certainly wasn't acting the way he remembered from his past life. He opened the skill window to review the details of the Skeleton Shard skill. As he read through the description, he assumed the strange behavior was due to his low mastery level of the skill. This made him realize he needed to increase his level quickly. While deep in thought, a loud growl suddenly echoed around him. A group of creatures appeared, coal wolves, and their arrival was perfect timing for a practical test. Although not particularly strong, they were fast enough to serve as a decent challenge for the summoned skeleton. Jaehyun immediately cast Skeleton Shard with force toward the incoming enemies. Magical energy began to form rapidly, preparing to summon the skeleton once again. The skeleton materialized fully and was ready for battle. Sensing the presence of foes, it automatically assumed a combat stance, prepared to engage. The wolves cautiously began approaching, gearing up to strike. With a confident smirk, Jaehyun commanded the skeleton to kill them. The skeleton charged forward, attacking the wolves with force. To Jaehyun's surprise, the skeleton performed far better than he had expected. He realized that, at this rate, he might reach the top level in a short time. But the surprise quickly turned into shock when the skeleton's bones suddenly scattered in every direction. Jaehyun stood frozen in disbelief, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The skeleton's skull fell to the ground, bearing an almost comically sad expression. Overwhelmed with confusion, Jaehyun felt stunned and unsure of what he had just witnessed. He quickly called for the skill window, desperate to find out what had gone wrong. As he read further, he discovered that he had forgotten to assign a combat mode for the skeleton. The skill included an AI system that learned from battle experience, and it had 3 available modes: defense, offense, and a special mode. Resting his hand on his head with a sigh, Jaehyun realized the root of the problem and calmly admitted that he hadn't set a mode yet. He decided to activate the defensive mode first. As soon as it was activated, a bright gleam appeared in the skeleton's eyes. However, what followed only deepened his disappointment. The wolves began dragging the skeleton around and tearing it apart with ease, as if it wasn't resisting at all. Once again, Jaehyun stood dumbfounded, unable to believe that what he was witnessing was supposed to be defensive mode. In a shaky voice and with growing desperation, he decided to activate the 3rd mode, the special mode, hoping that it might finally work. It turned out that the skeleton had started dancing, and Jaehyun realized the situation had become disastrous after witnessing the skeleton's performance. Tears welled up in his eyes as he blamed himself for how things had turned out. He collapsed onto the ground, overwhelmed with despair, muttering that he was on the verge of losing his mind. He tried to delete the character he had selected, but received a system message stating that accounts less than 3 months old could not delete characters. Sitting on the ground in hopelessness, he lamented that he couldn't even change the class he had chosen. He remembered that loan payments were set to begin the following month, and sarcastically thought that maybe he should get run over again. He started to wonder why his luck was so terrible, especially since things had only just begun to improve slightly. He then looked at the useless skeleton that wasn't helping at all, which only deepened his frustration and anger. He began scolding the skeleton, telling it was driving him insane, and ordering it to stay still. Then, he suddenly remembered a skilled necromancer from his previous life and wondered how that person had dealt with skeletons like this one. An idea suddenly struck him. He reopened the skill description window and discovered something important he had previously overlooked. The summoned creature was equipped with a deep learning system that allowed it to gain experience through combat. That was when Jaehyun realized the skeleton had been observing him during his battles with the coal wolves and had been learning from him. Standing beside the skeleton, he decided he would make full use of this information. With a confident smile, he spoke to the skeleton to get its attention. The skeleton turned toward him, looking slightly confused. Jaehyun began to speak with confidence, telling the skeleton that it was incredibly lucky to have a master like him. He added that, despite appearances, people used to consider him a genius, and that he had trained all his former team members until they reached the top. He told the skeleton to remember one core rule in combat. Then he suddenly lunged at it, landing a strike as he shouted that the rule was, if you can't dodge the attack, you die. The skeleton took a hard blow and collapsed to the ground instantly. Jae-hyun struck again, knocking it down once more. Unrelenting, he told it to get ready for another attack. He continued striking it with a relentless series of blows. With every strike, the skeleton fell again, but Jae-hyun showed no mercy in his training. Then he began giving it important combat advice, telling the skeleton not to just stand there foolishly after being hit, but to think about how to counterattack after dodging. Jae-hyun asked if it understood what he was saying. The skeleton stood in a ready stance, showing that it had understood. After some time passed, the coal wolves returned and launched another attack on the skeleton. This time, the skeleton quickly began applying what it had learned, skillfully dodging the wolves' attacks. Seizing a good opportunity, it delivered a powerful blow to one of the wolves. The skeleton continued fighting with impressive skill, while Jae-hyun watched in astonishment. Suddenly, the skeleton stopped and looked at Jae-hyun with deep admiration, prompting him to gently scold it, reminding it that he had warned against losing focus during battle. However, Jae-hyun smiled slightly and told it that its last move hadn't been bad at all. Jae-hyun's skill, fragment of the skeleton, began to improve rapidly as he continued fighting and training. He felt a sense of joy and satisfaction when a message appeared before him, informing him that his player level had increased. He then moved on to the beginner's village known as Vigos Castle, which was bustling with new players. While walking through the village among the other players, Jae-hyun reflected that the skeleton was indeed worth all the effort, and that, with just a few more days of training, it would be able to clear the training dungeon with ease. He then began to think that the real challenge was about to start, and that his first step would be reaching level 10. Suddenly he heard someone call out, "Hey!" Jae-hyun turned toward the voice and saw a large man standing in front of him with his followers, scolding him aggressively for bumping into his shoulder without apologizing. Jae-hyun thought to himself that these guys looked like nothing more than third-rate thugs. Annoyed at having his precious time wasted, he seriously considered killing them on the spot. Just as one of the men was about to attack him, someone else appeared, dressed in strange clothing, and effortlessly stopped the attack. The stranger smirked and told the attacker that it wasn't right to hit people like that. The large man responded angrily, demanding to know who this stranger was and whether he was with Jae-hyun, but the newcomer replied that he wasn't exactly with him. Jae-hyun instantly recognized who the stranger was. It was Matador Chief, a very powerful warrior from his previous life. He noticed the man's massive muscles and his signature odd attire. Jae-hyun vividly remembered that Matador had been a first-class warrior and the strongest player in his past life. He felt confused and uneasy, wondering why such a legendary warrior was here in this place. Meanwhile, Matador stood there, expressing his disapproval of the attacker's behavior in a sarcastic tone. The thug tried to justify himself by claiming Jae-hyun had hit him first and insisted that Matador had no right to intervene if he didn't even know who Jae-hyun was. Matador calmly smiled and quoted an old saying, "An eye for an eye," implying that Jae-hyun had every right to retaliate. At that moment, he released a fiery combat aura that terrified the attackers. The large man froze in fear as Jae-hyun watched the situation closely. Then Matador, still calm and sarcastic, remarked that the man had struck his palm with a fist first. With a terrifying grin, he added that it was only fair to return the favor. One of the thug's companions suddenly screamed, warning him that the man before them was Matador Chief, known for his overwhelming strength. That companion explained in horror that Matador was the leader of the Red Bulls Guild, one of the top 30 guilds, and was famous for his obsession with fighting. He reaffirmed that Matador was the renowned fighter known as the Killer. The attacker was shocked and questioned in deep fear why someone as famous as Matador would get involved in such a trivial matter. Matador then walked toward him menacingly and asked in a chilling tone, "What's your response now?" The man froze in place, unable to utter a word. Then he and his companions took off running, screaming apologies in sheer terror at Matador's power. Matador smiled with satisfaction, saying he was truly pleased that the situation had been resolved with words alone, while the attackers fled in terror and shock at his remarks. He then turned to Jae-hyun with a friendly smile and asked if he was all right, advising him not to pay attention to people like that. However, Jae-hyun quietly stepped away from Matador, leaving him puzzled by the reaction. Jae-hyun turned toward him and coldly stated that he no longer needed his help. He then walked away, leaving Matador standing in surprise at his response. Matador chuckled quietly to himself, remarking that Jae-hyun was quite a cold individual. As Jae-hyun moved further away, he felt angry at himself and frustrated by the sense of helplessness he had felt in front of Matador's overwhelming strength. His hand trembled from the intensity of that power, and he admitted to himself that he had felt fear in that moment. Resolutely, he decided that the next time he met Matador, he would be a completely different person. His expression was stern and filled with determination as he committed to that vow. The scene then shifted back inside the training dungeon, where flames burned gently along the walls. Jae-hyun sat there alone, thinking about the vast gap in strength between himself and powerful players like Matador. He recalled both Matador and another figure named Shiro, realizing that their powers were very close, and if he wanted revenge, he would have to become much stronger than he currently was. Suddenly, a powerful beast resembling a tiger appeared and launched a fierce attack on him. Jae-hyun's skeleton companion quickly intervened, striking the tiger with great efficiency, using its newly acquired skills. The skeleton maintained its aggressive assault, managing to deal heavy damage to the beast. After a swift battle, a system notification appeared before Jae-hyun, informing him that the skeleton had successfully killed the tiger and that his level had increased once again. Despite the success, Jae-hyun was not satisfied. He had taken 3 days to reach level 10, which was longer than he had expected. He looked at the skeleton, which appeared tired and worn out after the fight, and found its condition somewhat amusing. A message then appeared congratulating Jae-hyun for finally reaching level 10 and informing him that the training dungeon was now cleared of monsters. The beginner's mark was removed from his profile, and the rewards began to transfer to him, which brought him great joy. A device called the War Watch appeared on Jae-hyun's wrist. It contained various features such as status, quests, map, inventory, and also served as a communication device. Jae-hyun was delighted to be using this device again after such a long time, and he requested to display his status window. The status window appeared, showing his updated information. Name, Hurkan, level 10, class, necromancer. He had allocated points in strength, endurance, intelligence, and mana. A message then appeared asking him to distribute his available stat points. Jae-hyun began to think seriously, telling himself that this was his first time allocating points, so he needed to be wise in his decision. It would be natural for a necromancer to invest in mana or intelligence. But Jae-hyun smiled confidently and, in a surprising move, chose to put all his points into strength. After assigning all the points, a message appeared confirming that his strength had increased by 50 points. He then looked at his hand with determination, and another window confirmed that his total strength was now 53 points, leaving him completely satisfied with his choice. The skeleton stared at him with wide, blue, disappointed eyes, seemingly believing that Jae-hyun had given up on the idea of being a necromancer when he increased his strength stat. Noticing this, Jae-hyun grew irritated and asked the skeleton what it was doing. He then gently tapped it on the head and explained that he hadn't abandoned his path as a necromancer. Instead, he was trying to teach it and help it grow stronger. Jae-hyun began to explain that even if he raised his mana or intelligence, it wouldn't make much of a difference at this stage. On the other hand, if he boosted his physical strength, he would be able to pass on all the combat techniques he had mastered at the peak of his former power. Speaking with serious conviction, he said he was betting his life on the skeleton's development, urging it to focus on its training. Then, with a confident smile, he added that there were other ways to make up for the lack of stats. Jae-hyun then made his way to the Adventurers Guild building in the Vigos Castle branch. There, he found a group of eager new adventurers excitedly waiting to receive quests. The place was crowded and lively, with adventurers bickering over who would claim the quests first. Jae-hyun realized that the available quests at this stage weren't particularly great, but everyone's enthusiasm was clear. They were still beginners, after all. He approached one of the guild staff and told them that he too wanted to take on a quest, requesting to see the quest list. The staff member looked at him with surprise and explained that the remaining quests were quite difficult and that no one wanted to take them. He then asked Jae-hyun if he was really sure about choosing something like that. Jae-hyun paused and carefully examined the available quests, silently admitting to himself that they were indeed terrible. But at that very moment, a confident expression appeared on his face, and he declared to himself that he had found the hidden card he had been looking for. The quest he chose was titled Mount Bima Cave. The objective was to eliminate all low-level monsters in the vicinity of Mount Bima, and the reward was 10 gold coins. The guild staff member asked with concern if Jae-hyun was sure about accepting a low-level quest with such a small reward. Jae-hyun replied confidently that he was absolutely certain. Jae-hyun smiled as he thought to himself that if he managed to complete this tedious quest before reaching level 15, he would earn a very rare title called Prospect. He recalled that acquiring titles significantly boosted a character's stats, and the Prospect title, in particular, increased stats by a percentage, making it incredibly powerful. With great confidence, he declared to himself that obtaining this title would mark the beginning of his journey as a truly overpowered character. He then moved forward with the next step of his plan, enthusiastically announcing that his first move would be to prepare the necessary equipment. Jae-hyun arrived at the area near Mount Bima, where the quest was to take place. Then suddenly a look of shock and deep frustration appeared on his face as he saw his reflection. It turned out that the gear he had obtained was ridiculous and completely unsuitable. He was wearing brightly colored, comically strange clothes. He felt immensely embarrassed by his bizarre appearance, which was entirely inappropriate for the task at hand. He became overwhelmed with anger and frustration about how terrible he looked and screamed internally in sheer irritation. He then remembered that he hadn't had enough money to buy decent equipment, having spent most of his funds on gear for the skeleton, and had been forced to settle for these low-quality items. Determined to change that, he made up his mind to complete the quest quickly in order to earn enough money to buy proper clothes. Jae-hyun moved through the forest, reaffirming to himself that he would complete his mission as quickly as possible. After he left, a blood-soaked hand reached out from the bushes, as if its owner was pleading for help, before collapsing unconscious. The scene then revealed a wounded young man crawling through the grass, his voice barely audible as he called for help, with blood covering his face. His voice gradually faded into the forest, while his trembling hand remained on the ground as a sign of despair. A group of boys with sinister expressions stood nearby, whispering and laughing gleefully, seemingly enjoying their victim's suffering. Elsewhere in the forest, a young player shouted in delight, announcing that he had finally reached his destination. The young man, named Multi, stood proudly in his gleaming armor, proclaiming that his adventure was about to begin at Mount Bima. He boasted that he had reached level 11 and might soon rank among the top players, but his thoughts were interrupted by a nearby cry for help. He rushed toward the sound and found a man carrying his bloodied friend, begging for assistance, and claiming that the creature which attacked them was unlike anything they'd seen before. When Multi asked for details, they explained that they had barely escaped and had no healing potions left after the unexpected ambush. The wounded man added that they had fled by sheer luck, but without healing potions, his friend couldn't recover. Multi reassured them that he had a few potions on him and began digging through his bag to offer one. The gray-haired man thanked him excitedly and tearfully, promising they would repay the favor one day. But as soon as Multi turned around, the two men suddenly struck him from behind with a surprise attack, cruel smiles stretching across their faces. Blood splattered instantly, filling the scene in a single decisive blow. Multi collapsed to the ground, gasping as blood drenched him, while the traitors mocked his gullibility, saying it had made him an easy target. One of them declared that they would make full use of his belongings, ignoring his faint groans. Multi weakly protested that they had deceived him, but they called him a coward and blamed him for being naive. Their leader laughed mockingly, saying only a fool would fall for such a cheap trick. A system notification appeared, announcing the death of the player Multi and the extinguishing of his aura. Another message followed, showing the player's watch dropping to the ground as loot for the thieves. The gang gathered around the fallen watch, laughing, as one of them remarked that tormenting beginners was a never-ending source of fun. Their leader smiled viciously and urged the group to go find the next victim, proudly displaying the emblem of the deadly Ralph family guild. In another part of the forest, Jaehyun's skeleton stood ready, facing two massive tree beasts, growling in the shadows. The wooden wolves lunged at him with glowing eyes, their red fangs blazing like embers. Jaehyun raised a finger, declaring the activation of attack mode, and the skeleton's eyes lit up with a piercing blue glow. The skeleton lunged forward, cutting through the air with his glowing sword shimmering with a cold gleam. Its initial strike tore through one of the wolves, while the claws of the other shattered against the blade. A stream of notifications appeared on screen, confirming that the skeleton had slain the ancient tree wolves and earned hundreds of experience points. Jaehyun smiled faintly, acknowledging that equipping his servant first had indeed been the right decision from the start. Jaehyun looked at his odd clothing, telling himself that appearance didn't matter at all as long as it served its purpose. Meanwhile, the skeleton stood with its hands on its head in a comical gesture of embarrassment, as if it felt sorry for its master. Jaehyun told it to stop acting so strangely and get ready, since they needed to level up quickly to complete their mission in the area. The skeleton picked up its weapon and prepared to move, but suddenly an arrow shot through the air at high speed from a distance, hitting the skeleton in the head, causing it to freeze in place, stunned. Jaehyun was caught off guard by the sudden attack and looked around cautiously, trying to identify where the arrow had come from. Two men approached, and one of them began apologizing for firing the arrow by mistake, claiming he had thought they were monsters from a distance due to their appearance. The men came closer, trying to explain the situation, while the skeleton remained on guard, ready to protect its master. Jaehyun accepted the apology coolly, but he began to feel suspicious of the two men due to their odd expressions. He quickly noticed a player's watch on one of their wrists, and a blood-stained knife hidden behind the other's back, which deepened his doubts about their intentions. Jaehyun muttered to himself, scoffing at their nerve, and immediately realized they were planning to deceive him. But then, he suddenly smiled and told them he might be willing to forgive the incident if they gave him just one mana potion as compensation. The two men pretended to be embarrassed and claimed they didn't have any mana potions, but offered to help him level up as a way to make up for their mistake. Jaehyun asked if they were sure they wanted to help, and they quickly confirmed that it was the least they could do after what had happened. At that moment, the roar of beasts echoed through the forest, and one of the men smiled, saying it was the perfect time to start leveling. They explained their plan to Jaehyun. They would attack and weaken the monsters, and all he had to do was land the final blow to earn the experience points. Jaehyun agreed, still watching them cautiously, while the two men whispered among themselves, reaffirming their malicious plan. The large warrior stepped forward and provoked the wooden wolves, drawing their rage just as they had planned. The mage accompanying him cast a spell that enhanced the monster's attack power, causing their claws to glow with a terrifying purple energy. Then, he deliberately pushed one of the wolves toward Jaehyun, pretending it was an accident as part of their trap. Jaehyun was surprised to see the wolf charging directly at him and raised his arms, preparing for the attack. From a distance, the group watched, expecting Jaehyun to be easily overwhelmed by the sudden assault. But Jaehyun swiftly defeated the wolf with the help of his skeleton, then turned to scold it for reacting too slowly. He smiled confidently, gave the group a thumbs up, and told them to continue their experiment, leaving them stunned by his unexpected strength. The two men began to grow anxious and afraid, questioning Jaehyun's true level and abilities. They quickly decided to come up with a new plan to eliminate him. They chose to send a larger wave of monsters at once in an attempt to overpower him. During the group attack, the warrior took advantage of Jaehyun's distraction and lunged at him from behind, aiming to ambush him. He raised his heavy hammer high and shouted that this time he wouldn't miss his finishing blow. With full force, he launched the attack, completely confident that it would hit its mark. But to his utter shock, Jaehyun dodged the strike with perfect timing, leaving the man screaming in disbelief as he watched his attack fail before his eyes. Jaehyun moved with astonishing speed, sliding his sword beneath the arm of his massive opponent, slicing through his body and forcing the man to stagger backward as blood burst from his torn chest. While the skeleton attacked from another angle, the remaining two watched in shock, and one of them shouted in disbelief at what he was witnessing. Jaehyun ordered the skeleton to launch the attack, prompting its eyes to glow blue in preparation for the command. The two of them dashed forward at incredible speed, closing the distance in seconds. One of the thieves began screaming and begging them to stop so they could talk, but Jaehyun ignored him entirely. Together, Jaehyun and the skeleton delivered a swift double strike that landed powerfully, knocking both of their opponents to the ground amid cries of pain. The two were flung through the air by the force of the blow, while Jaehyun and the skeleton stood firmly in place within a wave of blue energy they had unleashed. Jaehyun turned away and coldly stated that he knew exactly what kind of people they were. He continued, saying they always betrayed those who trusted them and robbed them of everything. Then he slowly stepped toward one of them and said that such a trick might have worked on him in the past, but no longer. The wounded man began to plead, promising to give Jaehyun everything he had in exchange for mercy in his life. But Jaehyun ended the discussion with just 2 words, declaring that he no longer trusted humans. Without hesitation, he struck the man with a finishing blow, ending him completely. A notification appeared on the screen announcing that the player, Ralph, had died and that 8 war watches had been dropped without an owner. Jaehyun said that in the current situation, there was only one logical choice, to make the most of these spoils, starting with the clothes. Meanwhile, the skeleton was aggressively kicking the corpse of the massive opponent, seemingly venting its rage. Though blood covered its bones, the skeleton appeared moved as it looked at Jaehyun with a distinct expression, prompting Jaehyun to gently ask if it wanted something for itself. Jaehyun approached and reached out, enveloping the skeleton in a magical blue light that healed its injuries. The skeleton then lifted its sword high with excitement, now wearing a new pair of pants, standing proudly like a true warrior. Jaehyun laughed and asked if it really liked its new look that much. Then, in a calm tone, he remarked that appearance didn't matter in a game. What truly mattered was the core of one's strength. Despite that, he started showing off as he walked in his newly acquired outfit. He chuckled slyly, whispering to the skeleton that the war watches they obtained were a true treasure. He explained that when a player's war watch is sold, a random item from its inventory is dropped. Those items range from rare pieces like the Black Goblin pants and a sword infused with the essence of an ancient tree, to cursed skill books, and even money, which made Jaehyun laugh greedily and describe it all as a real stroke of luck. Jaehyun said these spoils had allowed him to create something new at an unexpectedly fast pace. He raised his hand to reveal a uniquely designed golden mask, then commented that he had finished crafting it even faster than expected. He declared that from now on, he would begin recording his gameplay, and he needed to build a strong identity to suit that purpose. He affirmed to himself that creating a distinctive persona was crucial for the next stage, and at that moment, his expression changed as he recalled talking about something like this before. Jaehyun sat proudly before a guild member, enthusiastically proposing a unique idea. He said that if all guild members wore the haha mask, it would make them spread like wildfire. The man agreed after some thought, prompting Jaehyun to smile excitedly and announce that the new guild would be named Haha Mask. He then looked at the mask in his hands and reflected that he had considered creating a completely different identity, but ultimately chose to stick to this path. Lifting the mask into the air, he infused it with glowing blue magical energy, stating that he no longer wanted anyone stealing his achievements or belongings. Anger flashed across his face, and he whispered with determination that he would use this mask to prove the legitimacy of his decisions and his worth. After putting on the mask, he told the skeleton it was time to go, his expression now serious and his energy fueled by anticipation. The scene shifted to a cracked mountainous region resembling ancient ruins, with a gate at its center. Jaehyun and the skeleton stepped through the gate, triggering a message that confirmed they had entered the Bima Mountain Cave dungeon. Inside, Jaehyun walked slowly along the stone walls, noting that he expected to encounter blue werewolves in this place. He added that the dungeon wouldn't be easy, but he felt confident now that his gear had improved, and aimed to complete it in just 10 minutes. He shouted with excitement as he ran through the dungeon's narrow passageways, the skeleton following close behind in full readiness. But after several hours had passed, Jaehyun was shown lying on his back, staring upward in exhaustion, wondering why no monsters had appeared yet. Suddenly he sat up, shouting in confusion, asking if there were no monsters in here at all. He began muttering angrily, saying the situation was strange, and that if someone had already cleared the dungeon, a message should have appeared. He began to suspect it might be a system glitch. Then his eyes froze and he stood still, having noticed something on the wall. He quickly moved closer to touch a swirling mass of glowing purple energy, remarking in astonishment that it was something different. The vortex rapidly expanded and began drawing in the surrounding air, as though opening a new gate. A message appeared, informing him that he had discovered an instant dungeon called the Theater, and asking whether he wanted to enter. Jaehyun knew that instant dungeons appeared randomly inside regular ones, and that progress in the original dungeon would pause until the instant dungeon was completed. He also knew that these dungeons were more difficult and offered better rewards, but came with greater risk. The catch was that one had to either clear the dungeon or die trying. There was no third option. Jaehyun thought it would be smarter to back out, since dying would lock him out of the game for 2 days, and he could spend that time doing other missions instead. But in the next moment, his expression shifted and he clearly said to himself, "But..." He then continued walking into the portal, declaring that all he needed was to complete it. Just that. As soon as he entered, a blinding light forced him to raise his hand over his eyes. He then realized he was standing in a vast arena, reminiscent of a Roman Colosseum, with himself and the skeleton at its center. Jaehyun looked around and wondered if this was an arena duel. He admitted he felt nervous and asked what kind of opponent they might be facing. The ground began to shake gradually, prompting Jaehyun to glance around and ask what was going on. Then, a massive werewolf-like creature appeared, standing tall before them, glaring and ready to strike. The giant werewolf stood before Jae-hyun, roaring with a terrifying sound, while a label appeared above it stating, "Corrupted Werewolf," with no level displayed. Jae-hyun took a step back in disbelief, repeating the word, "corrupted," and wondering why such a powerful monster would appear in a place like this. The beast charged at them with immense fury, launching its first attack, which caused a violent shockwave to ripple through the arena. The force of the blow struck Jae-hyun directly, flinging his body backward and slamming him into the ground in pain. Meanwhile, the arena was clouded in dust and smoke, and the skeleton stood amidst it, startled by what had just happened to Jae-hyun. It planted its feet firmly and raised its sword, emitting a low sound that signaled its readiness to defend to the end. Although the situation seemed dangerous, Jae-hyun stood back up again, smirking sarcastically as he chuckled at how absurd things were becoming. He then laughed loudly, as if the surprises wouldn't stop today, remarking that corrupted monsters were usually tied to main quests, making him lucky to have encountered one now. He ordered the skeleton to prepare for battle, joking that if they didn't defeat this monster, there'd be no dinner tonight. With a confident grin, he charged directly at the beast to begin the fight. The skeleton followed, and together the two advanced quickly and cautiously toward their opponent. The skeleton raised its sword, which Jae-hyun used as leverage to push himself into the air and leap high. The corrupted werewolf looked up in surprise, watching Jae-hyun as he prepared his strike from above. Excitement flickered across the werewolf's face, as though it were about to enjoy a delicious meal. At the same time, Jae-hyun began preparing a new skill to unleash on the beast. He summoned a dark purple energy from within himself and merged it with his weapon, declaring the skill's name, Devil's Curse. As soon as the skill activated, the dark energy coiled around the werewolf, and a look of shock spread across its face. The attack struck directly, causing the beast to stumble back with a cry of pain as Jae-hyun's blow successfully severed its arm. A message appeared on the screen confirming the activation of the skill Devil's Curse. Noting that the enemy's attributes had decreased by 10%, Jae-hyun confidently remarked that the skill wasn't bad at all for a first-time use. But the monster wasn't finished. It resumed its attack and launched a furious punch at Jae-hyun, who braced himself for impact. A new notification appeared, announcing that the corrupted werewolf had entered a berserk state and that all status effects had been completely removed. Jae-hyun sarcastically commented that it was foolish of him to think an instant dungeon would be that easy. At that moment, he decided to use a special skill he had been saving for later, but now realized the time had come. He raised his hand and said, "Slot on," then pressed the device on his wrist to activate the new ability. A surge of immense blue energy erupted from his body, enveloping him and spreading as a powerful wave throughout the area. A spiral of energy formed around him and shot into the sky, causing the ground to tremble beneath his feet. Then the energy burst all at once, and light flooded the entire arena. When the glow faded, Jae-hyun stood revealed in a new set of armor, cloaked in dark energy, as he declared with confidence, "All right, let's start the fight." This was the effect of his special skill, Slot On, one of the unique features in the game Warlord, which temporarily grants the user enhanced power drawn directly from the game's world. The effect of this skill was the activation of an enhanced form that granted the player temporary supernatural strength. This form varied from one player to another. Each had their own appearance and unique enhancements, making the experience completely individual. Because of this variation, players had collectively agreed on a single name for the form, Final Mode. Jae-hyun stood in his new form, enveloped in a blue aura, raising his hand with confidence as he declared he was ready for whatever came next. On the opposite side, the corrupted werewolf let out a horrifying roar, baring its massive fangs and threatening its opponent with savage intensity. The werewolf lunged at tremendous speed, while Jae-hyun prepared to face it, cloaked in the dark blue energy that intensified as the enemy closed in. The beast dashed sideways, raising its claws to strike with a powerful blow. It unleashed a series of attacks, but Jae-hyun dodged skillfully, though one swipe came dangerously close and nearly hit him. Seizing the moment, he quickly leapt away, avoiding another vicious strike that smashed into the ground and left a large crater behind. Jae-hyun realized then that this wasn't just any monster. Its speed and raw power made it a serious threat. If he took just 4 hits, the battle could easily end in the creature's favor. As the werewolf prepared to attack again, Jae-hyun smiled to himself, saying he had another plan. He unleashed a sharp blue wave from his sword aimed at the beast, attempting to interrupt its next attack and force it back. The monster roared in pain as the wave struck it, sending its body reeling backward while Jae-hyun stood firm, ready for more. Jae-hyun smiled calmly, saying that this was exactly what made the game fun, facing challenges like this. But in the next moment, his expression suddenly changed. He looked up in shock. The beast had leapt into the air and came crashing down with enormous force, prompting Jae-hyun to retreat quickly to evade the impact. As he dodged, he remembered that the beast was now in its berserk state, a phase in which its power increased dramatically. He turned and found the werewolf standing right behind him, its glowing red eyes locked on him, ready to strike. Falling toward the wolf, Jae-hyun mocked it, asking whether it too had forgotten something. At that moment, the skeleton appeared between Jae-hyun and the beast, raising its sword with determination. It delivered a direct and powerful strike, successfully severing the wolf's arm, creating an opening for Jae-hyun to regain his footing. Jae-hyun shouted to the skeleton that it was time to execute the move they had trained on together. The werewolf was taken aback when it saw the two of them rushing toward it at incredible speed, unable to react. Jae-hyun and the skeleton landed their strike with precision. The beast's body began to tear apart under the force of the double attack, breaking down into multiple small pieces without resistance. A message appeared confirming the corrupted werewolf had been slain, followed immediately by a notification stating that the Slot On feature had been deactivated. Jaehyun smiled after the battle and calmly said the result wasn't bad at all. A quest card appeared confirming the completion of the Purge the Beasts of Bima Mountain Cave mission with a reward of 10 high-tier gold coins. Additional notifications followed, confirming that the skeleton had defeated a powerful monster and that its skill had been upgraded to rank B. They also earned 20,865 G, along with the werewolf's skull and pelt as loot. Jaehyun cheerfully pointed out that the rewards were truly valuable. After the battle ended, a system message appeared before Jaehyun, informing him that he had obtained the rare necklace, Corrupted Tracker's Necklace. It belonged to the unique Chronicle-type item class, and increased all stats related to classification by 18 points. Jaehyun was surprised by the item's high rank and wondered how it could be non-tradable, yet superior to standard unique items, realizing then just how rare it was. He then noticed the name Corrupted Tracker on the item, which made him pause and wonder if it was connected to what he suspected about the main quest. Immediately afterward, 3 glowing windows appeared, announcing the registration of 3 new titles on his account. The first was Promising Newcomer, which granted a 3% increase to both intelligence and magic, exactly what he had been aiming for. The second was Challenger of Heroes, which boosted his endurance by 3 points. Jaehyun found that fitting, considering he had completed the instant dungeon solo. But what shocked him most was the third title, Corrupted Tracker. He hadn't expected that at all and was genuinely astonished. He confirmed to himself that this was the title of the first chapter of the main questline called Corruption Counter, increasing the significance of everything he had just obtained. This main questline formed the backbone of the Warlord game world, tied to a vast narrative involving central characters and major bosses. Due to the exceptional rewards it offered, every player aspired to take part in it, making it the most sought-after content in the entire game. Jaehyun recalled his past life, where he had barely reached Chapter 4 of the questline. Now, however, he had managed to unlock its beginning at a much earlier stage, prompting him to say that what was happening couldn't simply be luck. Smiling with joy, he raised his voice and declared that he had found the real treasure, then initiated the logout sequence, still in disbelief over his achievements. In the next scene, he returned to the real world. At that moment, breaking news was being broadcast on screen. The guild Hydra had officially entered the Neutral Generator dungeon, aiming to complete it within 3 months. Jaehyun sat silently before the screen, a cup in hand, his face marked by deep contemplation. Then he sarcastically commented on his fortune, saying, "The real treasure? Nonsense," clearly showing signs of intense frustration. He banged his head on the table in regret, lamenting that someone had already reached the final chapter of the quest, and if he entered now, there'd be nothing left for him to achieve. He began to wonder aloud if he should stop trying for now, and instead prepare for the next chapter later on. But after a moment of silence, a look of inspiration crossed his face, and he suddenly said, "Wait, maybe this is my chance." He realized that the entire world was currently focused on the Corruption Counter quest, which was nearing its conclusion as the first major quest in the game. It occurred to him that releasing a video about the quest at this time would go viral, making it a golden marketing opportunity. He began to imagine the number of views he could rack up, picturing himself as a king sitting on a throne, surrounded by wealth and success, laughing in triumph. He told himself it was fortunate he had recorded every moment of his gameplay, and that he would now edit and upload it immediately to WTube. He added that editing was the key, and that he couldn't entrust this task to just anyone. It needed someone who knew how to make a video shine professionally. He decided to reach out to someone known in his past life as the god of editing, and told himself that this had to be the right person. The scene shifted to a girl with pink hair and glasses, eating noodles while watching something on her phone. She was known as Editor Rumini. She received a notification requesting video editing for a dungeon clear video under the name Herkan, who was listed as level 15, and she was surprised by the request. She laughed sarcastically and questioned what kind of video a newbie like that could possibly offer after clearing a dungeon, assuming he was just some rich beginner trying to show off online. But suddenly her expression changed. She jumped up from her seat, screaming as if she had found something completely unexpected. She leaned toward the screen, eyes fixed with intensity, and quietly said, "I found it." Rumini, the freelance video editor known by the nickname Mouth of Hell, was holding her phone, staring at it in awe and astonishment, shouting with excitement that she had found her inspiration. Meanwhile, in another place, a woman stood in her luxurious apartment overlooking the city, holding a tablet as she gazed calmly outside. An employee rushed into the room, addressing her as director, and asked if she had called for him. She informed him that a new video related to the Corruption Counter quest had just been uploaded. She began explaining that the video was particularly intriguing because it showed a level 15 player defeating a corrupted werewolf alone, something that had never happened before. The employee looked shocked. He later clarified that their team had also reviewed the footage and confirmed that the player's level was indeed low, so there was no real need to give it much attention. Still, he admitted that he personally enjoyed the video. The woman smiled and said confidently that she wanted this player. Then she added that she wanted him now and ordered that he be brought to her immediately. Her identity was then revealed. She was Chai, the top figure in the financial world, and the heiress to the massive Thunder Group. In the world of Warlord, however, she was known as Sari, the Thunder Queen.